The story that you are about to hear is a compilation of documented true facts, featuring characters, events, or places that has played a role in shaping history. Please sit back and listen as I recite this narrative for you. Yamashita's gold, also referred to as the Yamashita treasure, is the name given to the alleged war loot liberated in Southeast Asia by Japanese forces during World War II and hidden in caves, tunnels, and underground complexes in the Philippines. It is named after Japanese General Tomoyoki Yamashita, dubbed the Tiger of Malaya, who earned the moniker after his 30,000-strong army conquered British-held Malaya, culminating in the fall of Singapore on February 15, 1942. Malaya and Singapore had been defended by a combined British and Commonwealth force of 80,000, but Yamashita's army had beaten the odds and defeated this far larger force, inflicting the worst disaster in British military history, according to Winston Churchill. Despite his success in wresting the territory from the British, Yamashita was exiled to the Japanese puppet state of Manchukuo in northeast China at the request of his rival, Japanese Prime Minister Hideki Tojo. Yamashita was able to return to frontline duty this time as the commander of the defense forces, only after Tojo and his government were defeated in July 1944, this time as the commander of the defense forces in the Japanese-occupied territory of the Philippines. The tide of the Pacific War had turned against the Japanese by September 1944 as the Allies closed in on their conquered territories. Yamashita was sent to the Philippines to organize the defenses of the islands. Yamashita ordered the withdrawal of his troops to the Sierra Madre Mountains northeast of Manila after realizing he couldn't defend the Philippine capital without massive civilian and military casualties. However, the Imperial Japanese Navy's Rear Admiral, Sanji Iwabuchi, defied Yamashita's orders and retook Manila with a force of 16,000 sailors. The subsequent battle between Iwabuchi's forces and the Americans saw Manila reduced to rubble and resulted in the deaths of an estimated 100,000 Filipino civilians. Rumors began to circulate after Yamashita's retreat into the Sierra Madre Mountains that the general had hidden vast amounts of treasure there. The Japanese are said to have amassed a vast fortune in stolen treasure and gold as they rampaged through China and Southeast Asia. As the tide of war turned against them, Prince Tsunoyoshi Takeda, the head of the prestigious Kwantung Army, decided that all of the stolen wealth should be kept hidden from the Allies so that it could be collected in secret after the war was over. To that end, Takeda allegedly directed the construction of the so-called Golden Lily Tunnels, a vast network of underground tunnels dug into the Philippines mountains to house the stolen loot. According to legend, Yamashita was tasked with building one such tunnel, known as Number 8, somewhere in the Cagayan Valley in the northeast of the island of Luzon. According to legend, when the tunnel was finished and filled to the brim with looted treasure, the slaves who built it and the soldiers who oversaw its construction were sealed up and left to die inside, so that no one but Yamashita and Prince Takeda would be alive to reveal its true location. Following the Battle of Manila, the Allies advanced quickly on Yamashita's position. Japan surrendered on August 15, 1945. Yamashita's men held out until September 2nd, when the general finally surrendered. Yamashita was later tried and convicted in the Philippines for the crimes committed by the men under his command. Tomoyoki Yamashita was hanged on February 23, 1946, despite appeals to President Harry Truman for clemency. If there was a treasure on the island of Luzon, the general took the location with him to his grave. Yamashita's fabled buried hoard, on the other hand, has enthralled treasure hunters for over 50 years and has been the subject of several books. According to some estimates, it is now worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The reports that the treasure is still hidden in the Philippines have enticed treasure hunters from all over the world for 50 years. Most experts dismiss its existence. The rumored treasure was the subject of a complex lawsuit filed in a Hawaiian state court in 1988 by a Filipino treasure hunter, Rogelio Rojas, and the former Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos. Rojas claimed that in 1961 in Baguio City, he met the son of a former Japanese army officer who mapped out the location of the legendary Yamashita treasure for him. Rojas claimed a second man, who served as Yamashita's interpreter during World War II, told him of visiting an underground chamber where gold and silver stores were kept, and told them about a golden Buddha kept in a convent near the underground chambers. Rojas claimed that within the next few years, he formed a group to search for the treasure and obtained a permit from Ferdinand's cousin, Judge Pio Marcos. Rojas claimed that in 1971, he and his group discovered an enclosed chamber on state lands near Baguio City, where they discovered bayonets, samurai swords, radios, and skeletal remains dressed in a Japanese military uniform. A 3-foot-high golden-colored Buddha and numerous stacked crates, filling an area approximately 6 feet by 6 feet by 35 feet, according to Rojas, were also discovered in the chamber. He claimed he only opened one of the boxes and discovered gold bullion inside. He claimed to have taken the golden Buddha, which he estimated weighed 1,000 kilograms, and one box containing 24 gold bars from the chamber and hidden them in his home. He claimed he resealed the chamber to keep it safe until he could arrange for the removal of the remaining boxes, which he suspected were also filled with gold bars. Rojas stated that he sold 7 of the gold bars from the opened box and was looking for buyers for the golden Buddha. Rojas stated that 2 individuals representing prospective buyers examined and tested the metal in the Buddha and that it was made of solid 20-karat gold. Soldiers stormed Rojas's house 2 months after he discovered the golden Buddha. They wore red ribbons around their rifles, indicating that they were members of the president's personal army. One of the prospective buyers was present at their gathering. Rojas and his family were being held at gunpoint by the soldiers. They then took the golden Buddha, gold bars, and the family's personal jewelry. If Rojas had chosen to resist, they would have killed all of them. Rojas reported the raid to authorities a few days later, but they refused to assist. At the time, President Ferdinand Marcos controlled virtually every state institution. This fact compelled Rojas to seek assistance from the media. His story made the front pages of newspapers and it was covered by all major television networks. And in an attempt by Marcos to smear Rojas's story, several articles were released claiming that Rojas was paid off by political opposition to tell lies. The media spectacle dragged on for weeks. Then, Rojas went missing from his family and the public. Rojas was arrested on May 18, 1971 by 3 men dressed in civilian clothes. His kidnappers claimed to be taking him directly to President Marcos for negotiations, but they took Rojas to a rundown structure and strapped him into a chair. After 5 punches to the gut, the man showed Rojas a picture of his family and told him that if he ever wanted to see them again, he needed to cooperate. They demanded that Rojas admit in writing that all of his claims were false and that the opposition had bribed him. His kidnappers also demanded the location of the rest of Yamashita's treasure. Rojas refused both requests and immediately regretted it. The man took out an old car battery and connected it to a cable, with the other end placed on Rojas. They turned on the battery, electrocuting the unfortunate treasure hunter on and off. He eventually caved in to their first demand. They waited for Rojas's wounds to heal before photographing him as proof of his statements against Marcos's opposition. Before being returned to captivity, he briefly met with his family and asked them to pray. After 10 minutes, soldiers escorted him away. His captors tortured him further in the hope of discovering more treasure, but Rojas refused to reveal any more information. Then, one night, he was left alone in his room while guards secured the door. One critical detail was overlooked by the president's man. Roger Rojas was a locksmith. Rojas had been waiting for an opportunity to escape through a small locked window in the toilet. He picked the lock, crept through the window, and descended the roof in silence. Rojas and his family fled to a remote part of the Philippines. They hid there for 10 years after he was imprisoned. He would never again see the golden Buddha. Rojas postponed his claim against Marcos until he was defeated in the presidential election in 1986. However, in 1988, Rojas and the Golden Buddha Corporation, which now owned the ownership rights to the treasure Rojas claims was stolen from him, filed a lawsuit in a Hawaiian state court against Ferdinand and his wife Imelda, seeking damages for the theft and the surrounding human rights violation. Rojas died on the eve of the trial, but prior to his death, he gave the deposition testimony that would be later used in evidence. The Rojas State and the Golden Buddha Corporation received the largest judgment ever rewarded in history in 1996. $22 billion, which was later increased to $40.5 billion with interest. The Hawaii Supreme Court ruled in 1998 that there was sufficient evidence to support the jury's conclusion that Rojas discovered the treasure and that Marcos converted it. However, the court overturned the damage award, ruling that the $22 billion award for the gold chamber was too speculative because there was no evidence of quantity or quality, and ordered a new hearing on the value of the Golden Buddha and 17 bars of gold only. After several years of legal proceedings, the Golden Buddha Corporation obtained a final judgment against Imelda Marcos in the principal amount of $13,275,848.37 for her interest in the Marcos estate, and Rojas' estate obtained a $6 million judgment on the claim for human rights abuse. Needless to say, neither Ferdinand nor Imelda Marcos paid a dime of the settlement. Although the Hawaiian State Court was not required to determine whether Rojas' treasure was the legendary Yamashita's gold, the testimony relied on by the court in reaching its conclusion pointed in that direction. Rojas allegedly followed a map given to him by the son of a Japanese soldier. He allegedly relied on information provided by Yamashita's interpreter. And he allegedly discovered samurai swords and the skeletons of dead Japanese soldiers in the treasure chamber. All of this led to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in the United States to summarize the allegations that led to Rojas' final judgments as follows. The Yamashita treasure was found by Rojas and stolen from Rojas by Marcos' men. In 1992, Imelda Marcos claimed that Yamashita's gold accounted for the majority of her husband, Ferdinand Marcos' wealth. Many individuals and groups, both domestic and international, are still looking for the treasure sites. Treasure hunters have been involved in a number of accidents that resulted in deaths, injuries, and financial losses. Rico Jose, a professor at the University of the Philippines, has questioned the theory that treasure from mainland Southeast Asia was transported to the Philippines. By 1943, the Japanese were no longer in control of the seas. It doesn't make sense to bring in something that valuable here when you know it's going to be lost to the Americans anyway. The more rational thing would have been to send it to Taiwan or China. Prominent among those arguing for the existence of Yamashita's gold are Sterling Seagrave and Peggy Seagrave, who have written 2 books relating to the subject: The Yamato Dynasty, The Secret History of Japan's Imperial Family, 2000, and Gold Warriors, America's Secret Recovery of Yamashita's Gold, 2003. The Seagraves contend that looting was organized on a massive scale by both Yakuza gangsters such as Yoshio Kodama and the highest levels of Japanese society, including Emperor Hirohito. The Japanese government planned to use loot from Southeast Asia to fund Japan's war effort. According to the Seagraves, Hirohito appointed his brother, Prince Yasuhito Chichibo, to lead a secret organization called Kinnoyori, or the Golden Lily, for this purpose. It is purported that many of those who knew the locations of the loot were killed during the war or later tried by the Allies for war crimes and executed or incarcerated. Yamashita was convicted of war crimes and executed by the United States Army on February 23, 1946. Many different types of valuables were allegedly stolen from banks, depositories, temples, churches, other commercial establishments, mosques, museums, and private homes. Various accounts claim that the loot was first located in Singapore and then transported to the Philippines. After the war, the Japanese hoped to ship the treasure from the Philippines to the Japanese home islands. As the Pacific War progressed, U.S. Navy submarines and Allied warplanes sank an increasing number of Japanese merchant ships. Some of the ships carrying the war booty back to Japan were sunk in combat. According to the Seagraves and a few others, American military intelligence operatives located much of the loot, conspired with Hirohito and other senior Japanese figures to conceal its existence, and used it to fund American covert intelligence operations around the world during the Cold War. These rumors have inspired many hopeful treasure hunters, but most experts and Filipino historians say there is no credible evidence behind these claims. At present, the Mines and Geoscience Bureau of the Department of Natural Resources of the Philippines is the Filipino government agency that grants treasure permit.
Hey everyone, I just wanted to say that I am incredibly grateful that you took time out of your schedule to listen to my narration. This is Nikki of Twisted Mind, wishing you a great rest of your day. Salamat.